at the end. Pictures.
Pictures.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Minerals Live. We got Dr. James Hagadorn with us again this week from the Denver Museum of Nature and Science.
And I came anyway. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Hey Graham, good to see you.
Yep.
Thanks for having me.
Hey,
Thanks,
Graham,
Richard.
Didn't you get the memo? It's Tropical Tuesday.
It's Tropical Tuesday?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Oh, man.
I did not get the Tropical Tuesday. I get kind of a tropical color shirt.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's
You
true.
know, I went somewhat tropical.
Yeah.
What's the
You, on the
temperature?
other hand,
Oh, this is stripes.
didn't participate in the memo in any way, shape, or
I'm
form.
in my prison striped shirt.
Nice.
Nice.
It's not orange and white, but it's close.
It's the new black.
Yeah.
Orange is the new black.
So what is the temperature outside here in warm and balmy Colorado?
I think it's like 40 or something because the wind was blowing all night last night, so it warmed it up.
Oh, it's a warm, so it is Tropical Tuesday. then.
Yeah, it's actually, I got a light sweatshirt, not really going. The wind, though, was pretty out of control
Intense,
last night.
yeah.
Like wake you up kind of wind up. where
My
I'm-
truck, I parked last night in a puddle that was about 4 or 5 inches deep, and the puddle froze into ice, and so my wheels were in little cups this morning, so I had to take my truck, rock it back and forth to get them out of the frozen ice cube, and then put it in four-wheel drive and drive out. So, yeah, it was fun.
So if it had been a really cold night last night, your truck would have been froze to the ground.
It was actually frozen to the ground, so that was the rocking back and forth part,
Was
just to
to
loosen
break
it
it.
a little, break the seal, you know, like the ice cubes in the tray where you put a little water on the bottom and
Yeah.
you break it and then they pop out. So
Yeah, I can see you out there at the hammer and chisel whittling your truck out in the morning.
super fun. So
Yeah, you'll pay attention to that puddle next time.
exactly. Well, it wasn't there when I parked before, so
It melted overnight, got you. So anyway, we're here to talk about, or James here to talk about, rocks you shouldn't lick, eat, or ingest.
Yes.
yeah.
Or sleep with in the case of some radioactive ones. Put some under your pillow, I suppose, if you were
Exactly.
looking at some torbanite or metatorbonite. Is that what he had? Oh, no, he had autunite out there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cupro Skladowskite.
Yeah.
Or cuprodiscosite or whatever it is.
Skladowskite.
Skladowskite.
Various
Easy
other
for you.
unpronounceable minerals,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, well, you know, not everything could be found by somebody named Jones. Yeah, there'd be a lot of Jones and Smithites. I'm sure there is some Jonesites and Smithites.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Smithsonite.
Smithsonite, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a Grahamite out there?
No, I haven't done anything famous, and all the people who study minerals really don't care about me, so they're probably not going to name anything after me.
Suttonite.
Well, maybe we can change
There might be a
that.
Suttonite or something someplace, because there might have been a famous Sutton along the way, but the rest of the folks that currently do small minerals aren't so interested in what I have to contribute. I will not be named by any of them, I can be assured of that.
Okay, readers and viewers out there, you can change that. Remember,
Right.
we need a mineral after this guy. Okay.
Yeah, well, maybe you'll find one in the back room there somewhere at the museum that is unnamed.
Yeah, that'd be pretty
Unknown,
cool.
you know, 1,352 if you get to that number.
Nice. Most likely in the micromount collection, right?
It most likely will be white and nobody will care still.
A little bit of fuzz on this thing. Oh wait, no, that's fungi. Oops.
If it's fuzzy, someone already cares. It'll be a white, you know, glassy mineral in the back of something. But anyway,
Yeah.
poisonous rocks.
Mm-hmm.
You have pictures too.
Yeah,
Richard
so
went
what-
out of his way to make that graphic.
Yeah, so first, just a quick shout out to Amy, who's up in the mountains, and she helped put this presentation together. She's part of the team, along with Graham and Richard and I. And so thanks for all your help, Amy, and for the folks at the museum that helped catalyze this. We just had a museum exhibit on, it's called Poison. And a couple of us went through the exhibit, and we were like, well, where are all the poisonous minerals? And not that like having a mineral itself is poisonous, but there are derivative products from those that are
Yeah,
used.
you know, realgar, you know, an
Exactly.
arsenic to make rat poison or something back in the day.
Yeah, or kill your brother who's like the next in line for the throne.
Yeah. You know, and we've worked at enough mines, and some things you don't even think about being particularly poisonous until you do something to them. You know,
Exactly.
cerusite. Yeah, don't think about it as much, but it's a carbonate, and if you ingest it, it becomes lead in your system, and then you get high blood leads. Oh, no, you just get stupid. Yeah. But anyway, some
That's
things
slowly
you-
happening on its own.
Yeah, it's sort of slowly happening anyway. That's old timers disease. That's different. But yeah, some things, you know, we've worked at the mines, we had to be aware of them. You know, that normally you wouldn't think of cerusite as being particularly poisonous, but in the mine when it's there and it's small, you know, it's already ground up or naturally small pieces. You're smelling it. You know, it's getting in there. You're not wearing your respirator, and pretty quick everybody gets a good blood lead that needs to be addressed. So that was something that kind of ties into this, but actual real life experience. Other things that you think about having poisonous stuff in them, galena, eat it all day.
Yep.
It's not bioavailable. You know, your stomach acid is not strong enough to break the sulfur bond, so it just goes through you. So anyway, we have the good doctor here to explain the complicated stuff.
Oh,
I'm
really?
not that smart.
Well, how about we touch on a few things that are kind of maybe that you might already have in your collection or have seen in your travels, and maybe a few oddball things too. How does that sound?
Yep, have at it.
So we are broadcasting live from Colorado, so we got to start with the most coolest one of them all, Coloradoite. And this is a mineral that isn't really widely collected or known, but
That's because it's ugly and gray.
Yeah, you know, I have a colleague whose husband is an engineer, and he says that all rocks are basically two colors: brown or ugly and gray. So
No, wrong. wrong.
well, we can work to convince him. Some of these are really actually beautiful, but Coloradoite is a mineral named after our state. It's a mercury telluride, and it oftentimes associated with gold deposits and silver deposits. And
I suspicion it comes from Telluride or Cripple Creek. Or...
what makes you think about that? Yeah,
I
there's
don't
big
know.
deposits of it up near Boulder, Colorado, and Durango and the like. And,
No, Boulder would have had it banned.
oh, absolutely.
The
you
People's
know.
Republic of Boulder would have had toxic things banned. But anyway, I digress.
But, you know, it could be used in the manufacture of parts used in Subarus, so it might be allowed, right?
That's true. Yeah,
So, and
if it
Algene
was
bottles.
used in a Subaru or an Algene bottle, it is allowed.
I'm just
I
kidding.
hope to God your Algene bottle wasn't made of beryllium or mercury. Your
Special
Subaru, yes,
Yeah.
there's undoubtedly a little bit of that in your Subaru.
Yeah.
You know, the beryllium's in the electronics.
It's in
or somewhere.
everything. It's in your iPhone. It's in, you know, photovoltaic panels. I mean, those things are all over. But, you know, the thing that I like is, you hear about Telluride minerals. And Telluride, like Telluride, Colorado, epic place to ski and hang out.
And collect rocks once upon a time.
Exactly. You know, Telluride minerals were actually found in Transylvania.
That was the first place?
Yeah,
That was where
Transylvania.
so where's the type locality for Coloradoite?
Coloradoite, the type locality is up in the Magnolia district, up in the Mountain Line Mayans. So wherever the heck that is, you know.
I didn't bring my glasses today, so it's all fuzzy.
Look at this from like 6 feet away.
Oh, maybe if we put it on the screen and Richard blows it up, I could see it.
In any case,
It's as big as it's going to get. I'm sorry.
We'll have to work on that. We'll have to have the expansion feature for for Minerals Live.
Oh my God.
So that's
Don't
our,
go there.
Yeah,
That's
just
our
leave that alone.
We're in trouble now.
So we've covered our obscure but locally cool mineral for the day, and maybe we should move on to something that was used quite often historically, and that's cinnabar. And
Sure.
cinnabar is a real lovely one. It's a mercury sulfide as well, and you know it's made its way into children's novels and all sorts of things. You know, it's a beautiful collectible mineral, but back in the day in China and other places, it was carved into beautiful bowls and dishes and ornamental pieces. It was also mined, of course, to get the mercury out, and there folks that mined it, the Spanish miners, didn't last so long. You know, you powder
Actually,
that stuff up.
we had pictures. You could have got those pictures from when I went to Tongren with that guy that was there smashing up the cinnabar, and they had the old school retorts.
Whoa!
They take the. There was a guy who was sitting there all day hand cobbing the cinnabar on a big lump of steel, throwing the rock away, and then they take the concentrated cinnabar, and they had this old school retort, which was basically some fire brick. They load this stuff in there and fire it from underneath, gathered the smoke up into a tube. You know, it went up, made a 45 down into a bucket of water, and the mercury drained out the bottom of this thing. You know, when it got so much in there, they'd open this spigot. And these guys had teeth like this long. You know, they had advanced periodontal disease, but it wasn't that. It was from their gum lines receding from the mercury poisoning. Open retort for mercury. It was not so happy. But that was 8 years ago. I saw that still going on. So there's probably a lot of third world countries where folks need money. Conflict mineral. It's causing harm to the world, cinnabar. We should ban that. Let's call the people in Boulder. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah, I mean,
Again.
the one that most people know, like kids, is the Mad Hatter from, you know, Alice in Wonderland. And, you know, when I used to live in Massachusetts, a lot of the waterways there were contaminated with mercury because they would take the pelts from animals and they turn it into felt, and, you know, for felt-lined hats. And there are whole river systems that are full of mercury, and so
Out here in the West, it was the same deal, but they used the mercury to agglomerate the gold,
right?
Consolidate the fine gold into something. They'd put the mercury in the riffle box, and then when the small gold came in contact, it would get together.
It gets sucked right out.
It gets sucked right out of it. But then what do? You've got the amalgam, the mercury gold combo, what do you do with that? You heat it up.
Heat it up.
You put it in the frying pan, and back in the day, folks didn't really understand that heating the gold in the frying pan you were later going to cook the fish in was a bad concept.
Yeah, exactly.
There was other ways of doing it, folks. I read a book where they used to take a potato, put your amalgam in a potato, and bake the potato.
Wow.
If you didn't have a container, you'd get some root or something, and you put this thing in there and throw it in the fire and just,
Hopefully you'll reuse the potato, huh?
Who knows how hungry they were.
Oh,
but anyway, lots of things happen with Cinnabar, and in your collection, it obviously has almost no toxicity. You're not going to lick it. What gets out with a little bit that comes off in your hands is easily washed. There's a mercury sulfide. It's not going to readily absorb into your skin. So again, it's on the list of poisonous stuff, but you'd have to work pretty hard at it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in life that are poisonous, and
don't make a bong out of Cinnabar.
Yeah. Although, aren't those legal in Colorado and Washington?
Probably not a Cinnabar bong.
Yeah, that'd be.
But anyway, we had to shout out to those of you who are watching the show and should be working.
Exactly.
Anyway, what else is on the list? I see stibnite.
Stibnite, that's a pretty cool one. So stibnite is a great source of antimony, and I was really interested to learn that back in the day they would actually have these the long crystals. They would actually use them as utensils. As sort of an elegant utensil. I mean, can you imagine using? So antimony's not so good for you, but using that as a utensil to like salad tongs.
It seemed like it'd be a pretty fragile salad tong, but
if you were an emperor, maybe.
Yeah, if you were an emperor, bring me another tong.
Exactly.
But, anyway, what else is on the list here? I can't imagine stibnite. I know it's got antimony in it. I know that's not one of the happier metals for you. What is a happy metal for you?
A happy metal.
Iron.
I think.
Iron?
Well,
iron's a happy metal. Richard chimes in with iron.
Iron.
Zinc. If you're
Is that
sick
because of his he's pumping iron all the time.
Yeah.
But think about it, like a lot of metals and substances in very small doses are good for us, but in large doses are not, right? And so there's a lot of metals that are in the vitamin we take every day that, tiny quantities, good for what you need.
Yeah. Well, that can be said of pretty much everything. Water in a large enough quantity is poisonous. You can drink enough water to kill yourself. Wash all the salt out of your system, and you short circuit and die. So even water in enough of a quantity beyond sticking your head in the bucket. Don't do that. Unless you're in Boulder. Those people. I was up there yesterday.
It's all good.
No, it's Boulder. But anyway, what else on the? Oh, we got Orpiment and Realgar here.
Yeah, let's check these out. And these are a fun one. Orpiment and Realgar are basically, arsenic sulfides, and one. For those of you that are listening that don't already know this, Realgar basically decays to orpiment over time, and you can see that in our exhibits at the museum.
Yes, you can
decaying little powder.
You can see your orpiment crystals, and apparently sunlight helps this. They're a little photosensitive, and with a little more sunlight, these things will decrepitate a little faster. The bacteria apparently like the sunlight or the warmth or something to turn the Realgar into para-Realgar, and eventually into your specimen to nothing. And those of you who've had one on the shelf, you noticed a little orange-red halo around as your mineral gradually becomes nothing. We were talking about the orpiment. We've certainly had a lot of experience with that. And again, the Realgar is more of an issue because of the way the sulfur's bound in it, that your body can actually digest that. The bond is not so strong between the arsenic and but in orpiment, because there's two sulfurs in it, it's bound up a little tighter. You can eat it. Probably wouldn't do that. But your body has a hard time breaking those molecules apart. The acid in your stomach's not strong enough, and
we still don't recommend eating your samples. Whatever they are.
Well, unless like you're out of vitamins.
Where's the disclaimer?
Well, go down to Walgreens or CVS or something.
Yeah, and get your one a day with arsenic.
Yeah. A lot of these minerals are forming as hot metal-rich solutions coming up in volcanic episodes.
They're 400, 500 degree water, 800 degree water. They're not normal conditions that you would experience, hopefully, in your mineral cabinet.
Yeah. But, one of the things how many of you all been to Yellowstone? Yellowstone, you see the sulfur springs. That's a place where actually you can go see orpiment and Realgar being formed.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the orange colors there are like bacteria and
the iron
and other fuzz, but those minerals are being formed in that hydrothermal system.
And actually a lot of just if people didn't know about it. A lot of these hot spring things, particularly at the mid-ocean ridge and stuff, that's where we get the black smoker deposits, the really, really heavy, well mineralized deposits all come from these volcanic upwellings of water, which, maybe in 50 million years or 100 million years, Yellowstone will be another one of these mineralized things where stuff has been bubbling up and accumulating. Again, don't drink the water at Yellowstone. Seems like a good thing not to do.
I've never been tempted.
You've never been tempted? You didn't want to. You didn't want to lap at the pool.
Well, first of all, it's really hot. It's pretty slimy looking.
Well, where's your sense of adventure?
Yeah, okay, we'll try. Geologists love to lick things, so I would try a taste, but just to get a kick.
So we covered orpiment, realgar, fluorite.
Fluorite. Oh, that's one that a lot of people know about. And wait, one thing. Let's go back to orpiment and realgar for a minute. One of the things that you see this picture here with this fine young lady putting the cherries on top of the pastry that she's just made, and there's a skull in the background. And so for centuries, arsenic has been known as the inheritance powder, and it was used as on arrowheads and tips. It's used in fireworks and pigment, but really its fame was really as an inheritance powder for basically knocking off the next person.
Whoever's ahead of you in line for whatever it is you wanted. And you touched on the pigment thing. In the old days, hundreds of years ago up until quite recently, a lot of the old pigments were minerals that was what was available. They take azurite and grind it up. They take malachite, grind it up. Orpiment, realgar. They probably figured realgar made a really bad red pigment after a while because it turned orange.
Cinnabar even.
Cinnabar because it stayed red. A lot of these older paintings have things in them that are not necessarily healthy for you. And there's a little sub-market. There's a few guys I know that actually provide ultra pure mineral specimens for grinding up to turn into pigment, to do restoration, historically accurate restoration on these old paintings where stuff has fallen off, they've lost the chip, and they want to find an azurite that looks like this. So they'll look for an azurite from Germany to match some German guy's painting of this time period. So there's guys that have created this little mini business, and they get hundreds of dollars an ounce for this stuff when they find the exact right thing to mix with the linseed oil or whatever was available to do historical restorations of paintings. So don't lick your old paintings either, folks.
So on that note, if you guys are ever in Colorado and you come through Denver, there's a really amazing museum that just opened a couple years ago that most people don't know about, and it's called the Clifford Still Museum. And Clifford Still turns out, I don't want to say he was the Pablo Picasso of his time, but is sort of at that level of artist. And his whole collection and estate was donated to a foundation here which created a museum. It's open to the public, and in that museum there's a really nice exhibit. One of the different things about Clifford Still is that he made his own paints, made his own pills, and there's a small exhibit there that shows some of the crushed up minerals that he would mix to pigment, use as pigments to color his paintings. And so if you're interested in learning more about that and you're in Denver, stop by. They've got a really nice illustration of how you mix it to make an oil versus a pastel versus a watercolor, and that's as much as I know about painting. But
anyway, I used to sell the rocks to this guy for pigments.
Maybe you knew Clifford Still,
Nah, he's probably before my time. But yeah, I used to sell pigment rock for people to sort out. Nice. There was one guy that kind of gather stuff up, and he'd say, "Hey, I need some azurite. It needs to be from here or there," and I'd go out and get up 50 pounds or whatever we could find, and he'd pay me for it. And that was the subsistence mining in the 80s. Was when you were really down and out, you knew this guy would sort of pay you eventually. And he'd say, what do you need this week? And I need some of this or that. So you go out to some hole and you'd be in there all day picking up little pieces, and you'd get a pound of this stuff, and he'd give you $20 for it. But in the 80s, that was enough to get by on.
Yep.
And that's how I made a living collecting back in the day. When I didn't find any wolfenite or anything that was cool or somebody pay you real money for it, you'd call this guy up and go, "What do you need?" And you go, "I need 1,000 pounds of hematite from Baus." I'm like, okay, so you drive out to Baus, you go out to the mine dump, and you spend all day gathering up 1,000 pounds of hematite. He give you 50 cents a pound for it, so you could make $500 for that day's worth of work. But boy, it sucked to go to Baus to pick up hematite blades. But push came to shove, it was food money.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like ramen soup in college, right?
Yeah, it was ramen. It was basically ramen, generic ramen, not the generic. The white label with the black writing on it ramen that didn't taste quite right, or the macaroni and cheese.
Macaroni and cheese.
The Kraft was like 60 cents a box, and you get that cheap stuff, the
Same
white
price brand.
Yeah, the simple value or straight value or whatever they called it, and it was a white box with the writing on it, and it didn't taste like macaroni and cheese, but those were the days.
Oh, that's great.
So we got fluoride on
Let's
the list.
talk about fluoride. That's one that's real common. I mean, you must have collected a lot of fluoride in your
I
days.
collected mountains of fluoride, tens of thousands of pounds of fluoride.
What did you do with all the fluoride that you collected over the years?
A lot of it got turned into slabs, actually. We used to collect it and cut it up for a business I had in the early 90s, and we made little clocks and widgets out of it and vases and stuff. But I probably collected 40 or 50 tons for that business over the few years it was open. We just go out and get big, massive hunks of this stuff, and we cut it up into slabs, and I sell it to the school ID guys, who wanted to chip it into octahedrons. And I don't think, other than the twitching, the fluoride really affected me. I never really associated the twitching with my vast experience with fluoride, but maybe I should have.
Yeah, I mean, fluoride's a mineral that's pretty important for industrial purposes too, both to make, mix with sulfuric acid to make, hydrofluoric acid, and then that's sort of a precursor for a lot of industrial materials like Teflon, Prozac, semiconductors, things like that. And
it's a precursor for Prozac?
Prozac, you need fluoride to make Prozac.
Wow.
Yeah, this explains
Maybe that's
a lot.
why I'm mellow. Maybe I got enough.
Oh, I've got plenty. I'm naturally
Prozac'd up from tons of fluoride.
Yeah.
You never really consider fluoride to be particularly poisonous, and I guess unless you heated it with sulfuric acid in a confined space.
Well, the trick with fluoride and its sort of byproducts, particularly fluorine, is that in drinking water, and I don't mean like yours and my drinking water, but like in rural settings, sometimes people get too much, like in China and India, and then it results as they have problems with their bones and joints over a long time scale because they're getting so much of it in the water.
Yeah, you usually say they got great teeth. For some reason, it makes your teeth gray if you got too much of it. That's like the first thing that happens is you end up with uniformly gray teeth from having too much fluorine in the water.
Yeah, there's a town south of Death Valley I used to do field work in called Tacopa, and there's Tacopa Hot Springs there, and you go there, and I notice a lot of people that live in the area, it's a small town, have kind of fairly brown stained teeth, but never had a cavity.
Yeah.
And the water there has got not a super high level of
but
fluorine in it,
enough that it's causing a problem.
Yeah.
Here's a good one. Fluoride. We're moving on from fluoride.
All right. Adios, fluoride. It was fun.
Adios. It was
fun. Wait, can we say one thing on that? For those of you that are concerned about, fluoride being added to your drinking water, there's a little cartoon here. It's an issue that's kind of controversial in the same way that global warming is, or evolution and other things. And there's actually a lot of science and epidemiology behind the addition of minute amounts of fluoride to drinking water. And so if you're interested in that, I'd say get on Wikipedia, look at a peer-reviewed article or what you consider to be a credible source. But a little bit of a metal or a mineral or an element like this is actually in many cases good for you, but a lot of it isn't. And so I think people get a little bit more alarmed about that than they
there's
ought to
a
be.
substantive amount of folks that could take a kernel of truth and twist it into something that really has nothing to do with the kernel that they found first.
Yeah.
And the fluorine water thing, regardless of what side of the issue you're on, is one of those things. There's a lot of places where it's got more in the water than they'll ever add, but nobody talks about that.
Yeah, I mean, here in Colorado, a lot of our water has trace elements already. In fact, almost all of our water on the Front Range and on the western slope has about the sub level of fluoride in it that you'd have if it was added by, let's say, a water provider in California, because that water's flowing through all the rocks in the mountains here and picking up a tiny bit of it. So,
or being released from a mine by the EPA.
Okay, that's another story.
But anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But we digress.
We digress. It's all
we
fun.
hate Boulder. Anyway,
What's
calcinthite.
Is this real or a fake? That's a question, Tell us a little bit about the market for calcinthite. It's a pretty rare mineral. It's got a lot of copper in it. It's really water soluble.
Hydrous copper pentahydrate or something like that.
Exactly.
It's five coppers in a pile of water.
Yeah.
You see it at the mines. It's about when they're doing these big heap leaches to get the copper out. Anywhere where that stuff comes down and you get some splashing, a little bit of drying on it, it splashes, dries, you get these calcinthite crystals growing. They use it to kill roots, your tree root killer. Yeah. When you open it up, it's a jar of blue crystals, and you pour it on top of the tree stump there to make the tree stump stop growing. Mm-hmm. It's pretty toxic to pretty much everything on the planet. Fish really hate it. Yeah.
When they see
Plants
three-headed
hate it.
fish, plants,
No,
algae.
actually, you put this in the water, and within a few hours, your fish actually drops to the bottom and becomes a fossil. This stuff is really poisonous,
Yeah.
folks. And most of the chalcocite crystals that you see or may see on the market are fakes. They're lab grown or they're post mining.
Yep.
We'll see ropes and all kinds of things replaced by chalcocite, or as the seed, if they're not replaced completely as the seed, they've chalcocite are growing out of them. So you'll get a piece of rope this long, and there'll be a bunch of cool chalcocite crystals growing out of it, or a piece of wood, or mine track. A lot of times the iron.
You ever see a canary coated in it? You know, the canary in the coal mine.
Most metal mines, they didn't haul canaries in. They weren't
Yeah.
so much worried about the methane.
Yeah.
But chalcocite, almost all of it that you see is generally post-mining. I'm sure there's some pre-mining chalcocite someplace, but it's highly water soluble. If you live back east, it eventually turns into a rounded blue knob from just the humidity. But it's another one of these minerals. It's super, super soluble in water, so it's really easy to get it into your system. And if you're handling it, after a little bit, you'll invariably go like this, and you can taste the copper. Yeah, you'll do this. You'll end up with a chrome on your lip, and you can taste the copper for an hour after you get some of this on your hands. Probably of all the things we've discussed today, this is the easiest one to ingest. Enough of it to do some harm.
Yeah.
Fortunately, copper's not all that toxic to people. You probably have to eat a pile of it. We should look up what the LD50 for copper is.
Yeah, exactly.
LD50 is a lethal dose for 50% of the people. So we can look it up. It's probably a pound or something. It's some horrendous amount, but a very little bit of this stuff goes a long ways, folks. But most of you aren't going to be collecting chalcocite. Nothing to worry about.
And my understanding is a lot of these metals too. If there are any moms out there or dads to be, a lot of these metals don't pass the placental membrane. Some of them do, but that's a big concern when people are thinking about LD50s and toxicity. Is that for a gestating baby or something, it's a much bigger deal.
Yeah. So don't lick chalcocite and procreate. There you go. There's simple rules.
He said it, not me.
Moving on.
The one that I get that I always blows my mind, and let's go to this next one here, is it's the second most common mineral on Earth, on the surface of the Earth, and it's quartz.
Yeah.
And quartz is a mineral that's all around us, and we got a dozen different names for it. And I worked in quartz.
Name them. Survey says name 12 quartz names.
Okay, agate, rose quartz, smoky quartz, milky quartz, sard, jasper, chalcedony. Wait, I don't even know which ones am I repeating now? Amethyst. The list goes on. Opal.
So anyway, there's a lot of different kinds of quartz, folks.
Yeah.
But the reason it's toxic is
citrine.
Citrine. Well, those are all kind of the same sort of. I was wanting something more like chalcedony, opal.
Yeah.
Go a little further down the list for the quartz, but the only reason quartz is particularly toxic, it's sharp when you break it.
Yeah, that's not a really big deal, though. I mean,
maybe
for your
folks,
delicate little fingers here.
I can assure you that this big slit on the back of my finger was from digging quartzes. But it's poisonous. Not in the normal sense that you think it affects some biological process and you die, like orpiment or realgar or any of these other things. The quartz, when you make it small, it gets into your lungs, and because of the shape of the little fragments, it rolls back and forth inside your lungs, inside the alveoli or alveoli, if you say it right. It rolls back and forth inside there and irritates these things. And as it's irritating these things, your body forms some scar tissue around it to seal it off, stop the irritation. Well, eventually you get enough scar tissue in your lungs that also stops the breathing. Yeah. So it's a long-term thing where you get it, and the quartz has to be of a certain size, so many microns in size. It's not all that easy to get silicosis as a general person walking around in the world. We showed a picture there of a quarry where they were cutting granite or doing something.
Actually, that's not a quarry. That's I know it looks like a quarry. Quarries are one place you can get it. I actually worked in quartzite quarries for 10 summers, and I now think back like we're sweeping around this quartzite dust to get it off. We're not wearing respirators, but again, we weren't there for 20 years, but there were many a day where you're like, oh man, like
you had your nose is plugged up,
your face is all dusty, but that is actually a well pad, and that's where that's frac sand, and so that's fugitive dust, and so basically the people
had to go for fracking. What are you, from Boulder?
No, I think fracking, it's an important part of our economy, and
Apparently just took Richard out with the
Richard is joking over here.
He's joking
That's
over
okay.
here.
No, I mean fracking. It's all around us in Colorado. It's Pennsylvania. I mean, people have been fracking wells for a long time, and it's part of. I mean, for those of you that aren't in this oil and gas industry, I mean, fracking is basically where you hydraulically put a portion of an underground well, typically a horizontal well or something, under high pressure, and it sort of breaks apart the rock. And the idea is that that will then liberate fluids, whether they be natural gas or oil, or in some cases even water, to then flow back up the well once it's sealed or perforated. But being that it's deep underground, those cracks will basically close back up, and so they include like sort of slick fluids in the water mix, as well as little grains of sand.
Yeah, very specifically shaped grains of sand that have certain properties to them, allow them to wedge open. They've got enough tensile strength that the rock doesn't break them. They have a certain shape to them. There's a whole
science behind it.
Whole science behind the shape of the quartz that goes into the sand for fracking. But
so fracking comes from hydraulic fracturing. The sand, which is basically silica, gets pumped in. And most of that sand is from Precambrian and Cambrian age, what are called aeolianites, which are ancient dune deposits.
Where the sand was rolled around to get this very special
the right
shape.
Size. And sorted, so all the other minerals basically, for the most part, are kind of winnowed out of it, so it's mostly quartz. And sometimes they actually break the quartzite rock or the sandstone to do it, which creates more angular boundaries. Other times it's basically still got its nice spherical, rounded shape. But there's a whole science of ooids. Yeah, like ooids. They're like silicious.
You can look that up, folks. Look up ooids.
I had a student once did a presentation, and he was like, "Silicious is delicious." And
that guy, did you get him some help after that, or was there help available to somebody who says things like this? Did he go to the tower with the rifle? I mean, that's kind of weird.
I don't think he was thinking about silicosis at the time, but really, this is a kind of thing where you work in an industry, you get exposed to this all the time, like for 20 years.
Yeah, when we worked in the mine,
wearing a mask.
In the mine we drilled with water back in the early days. They didn't understand silicosis back in the mid,
The Widowmaker.
The Widowmaker. The first drills that came out, these guys were in the mine. The first percussion hydraulic or pneumatic drills, these guys were in there drilling these holes in giant dust clouds. And they're like, after 5-6 years of that kind of volume of silica, they were done. It was like black lung. Everyone's like, how coal functions in much the same way as it fills up the little sacs in your lungs, and then you basically die. The quartz, again, in your collection, not much of a problem. Yeah. Don't grind your quartz crystals without water.
Yeah, and don't snort it or anything. I mean, but you'd have to do a lot of that, wouldn't you? I mean, that's
you have to do quite a bit of it. I don't know. I never figured out what their limit is, what the LD50 for quartz is.
Let's not find out.
All right. So we got galena on here.
God, this is one I get asked about all the time. You must get asked about it all the time too. Kids ask me, teachers ask me.
Well, again, most people, when they do, if they're smart enough to know about lead, obviously.
So galena is lead plus sulfur glued together, right? It's a lead sulfide.
It's a lead sulfide, and it's an extremely common mineral, and pretty much every metallic ore body has some galena in it. This is from galena and sphalerite from Creed.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
I don't know where that one's from. It's too fuzzy.
That's Commodore mine, yeah. It's down near Creed, yeah.
And yet, as we were talking about, a lot of these things, they form at really high temperatures in an environment that's not readily available right now. Like your mineral cabinet should not be 400C today. Yeah. If it is, things have gone wrong and you've got other problems. Like
your house is an oven.
Your house is an oven, and it's on a really hot oven at that point because it's 500 degrees.
Yeah. Someone's standing outside of it with a giant magnifying glass in the sun.
Down on your collection. Yeah, your photosensitive minerals are gone. Yeah. But galena is another one of these things. People go, when I worked in Missouri at the lead mine, a lot of these guys would get leaded were the mechanics. And people are like, why the mechanics? Because the truck would come in, they wouldn't adequately wash the truck, and they begin to weld on it. When they begin to weld on it, they heat up all the galena dust and stuff from the mining process, and so the truck drivers and mechanics that were around these vehicles were getting leaded. The truck drivers, to a certain extent, because the lead mud would end up on the exhaust manifold and on parts of the truck, and they're sitting there idling, and this would create some lead fumes. Mostly the mechanics were the guys that were leaded up that had high blood leads. Welding, cutting, grinding, doing things to these things that heated up the lead. Strangely, the guys that smoked, like, what's smoking? The problem is they get that galena dust on that cigarette, and when they inhale that cigarette, it's like a little mini refinery on the paper.
Whoa.
So as they're heating up, as they're drawing in that cigarette, they're heating up the lead dust on the outside of the paper, and they're actually ingesting lead vapor. So the smoking without washing your hands was one of the biggest ways for these guys to get leaded up.
Holy smokes.
Nobody thinks about that, but that cherry red, cigarette temperature was enough to go ahead and separate the sulfur and the galena to become lead.
It's almost a widowmaker in and of itself.
Yeah. If you smoking wasn't bad enough, let's smoke in a lead mine. So a lot of these places had yeah.
Do you work for the EPA or something? This is great, dude. Great advice.
Yeah. If it wasn't bad enough, if you smoke,
please don't work in a lead mine.
You don't work in a lead mine. No, I worked in Missouri for 6 months, and they'd have this was obviously an issue working in a lead mine. The guys in the refinery had a much more strict, lead program than we had in the mine. But as part of our training to work in the mine, we're told, wash your stuff before you start cutting and welding on it. Wash your hands if you smoke. Wash your hands before you eat. Do all these things. Change at that particular mine. It was company policy when we came out. Nobody took their work clothes home. They provided uniforms. They provided change house. They provided showers, and everybody was required to change their clothes, to shower before you left the property, to fugitive lead emissions, to prevent bringing this stuff home. So
that's good. That's a good protocol. I mean, and lead, you keep talking about Missouri, for those of you that don't, I mean, what are you talking about in Missouri? You're talking about the tri-state district, right?
Well, no, Missouri, you're talking about the viburnum trend.
The viburnum trend, which
is it's 100 miles.
That's where all your batteries come from, basically, and many other things that are.
But these are huge mines, folks. I mean, you can't imagine. I worked at a place called 29 Mine. It was a little separate, smaller mine that probably only had about 30 miles of tunnels in it. When you went a little further,
30 miles of tunnels? Holy smokes.
Yeah, like I said, it was a much smaller mine, but we'd drive 7 miles out to the work area where we're collecting the calcites one way, and then there was a lot more tunnels after that went everywhere. What should we call it in Tennessee? Brain fart.
Elmwood?
There we go. I was there. Yeah. Carthage, that place has hundreds of miles of tunnels. Mm-hmm. When you'd go down at 35 Mine, you could drive all the way up to the other mine at Buick there, and it was 20-something miles one way up to that mine, and another, now they've connected Sweetwater down to the other direction, I believe. So there's 30, 40 miles of tunnels there, and they was a few miles wide, and some places a couple hundred feet tall. That's how much galena was available.
Yeah.
It was an amazing place to work, and we dig these giant calcites out of the pockets there for a summer.
Yeah. And I mean, the galena there that comes out is incredible. These huge crystals. I mean, one of the things that has always impressed me, I took a class that focused on recycling recently, and lead is like one of these success stories where the recycling of that metal in our society has gotten to the point where it's like, I don't know, 99% because...
Yeah, they don't throw it away. I mean, tire weights at the automotive place, you see the guy throw them in a bucket. Somebody pays for that.
Yeah.
The company that owned the mines, Doe Run Company, operates a giant, battery recycling place there. It was a cool place to work for a summer.
Yeah.
It was a really cool place to work.
Pretty amazing. Should we talk about some other stuff here? Maybe some more obscure stuff? This is obscurite. I'm just kidding. This
Hutchinsonite?
Is Hutchinsonite. So this is like a thallium, lead, arsenic sulfide, and this is a mineral. I don't know how many folks do you think collect this stuff out there.
I don't know. What's the biggest Hutchinsonite crystal anybody's ever seen? Are we talking millimeters? Are we talking a
Is
big
there a scale on that thing? No.
Yeah, it's pretty tiny. It's pretty tiny.
Yeah,
That's a micromount collection. That's a micromount.
Are we talking something that may, if it gets to a millimeter, folks get excited?
Yeah. You might actually accidentally breathe one day. But,
you breathe up some thallium. But again, it's a sulfide mineral. You're going to have to heat it. You're going to have to do something to it.
Or powder it. I mean, it was used to kill basically rats and ants in people's homes up until the 70s, and then people realized, it's probably not so good for you. So, but again, not necessarily in the form that we might have in our collections.
Most of these things, if you're getting the drift of this, most of this stuff, you're going to have to go way out of your way to make it toxic. What else? We got torbanite. Here's something that's interesting.
Torbanite.
Torbanite.
All right, let's go to torbanite. We'll skip the most important one of them all.
Which one did we skip?
No, going back. You can't do the reveal. Okay, torbanite. Now this is like the one that leprechauns like the most, right?
Yeah.
It's basically copper and uranium phosphate, huh?
It's cool stuff. And this one here doesn't really do it justice. A lot of times this thing's like a neon green. I mean, it's an amazing green. Mm-hmm. Out at Silver Bell, they had torbanites that were inch and a half crystals out back in the day. You can still find them here and there in old collections. There's some other. Do we have another uranium mineral on here that's even more bright than? Do we have some autunite or something? Anyway, folks, I digress.
Yeah.
Most of these minerals are so slightly, even though you put the Geiger counter over them, their rate, really goes off. The chances of this being of any consequence to you are pretty slim. The byproduct's radon.
Yeah.
And if you got some ventilation in your house, if you don't stick your head in your mineral cabinet and leave it in there after you've had it shut for months or years, it's not going to hurt you if you don't carry it in your pocket prior to doing any kind of, children finding.
What if you put it in like a plastic bag and then put the bag over your head for a couple months?
I think that would be a good idea if you lived in Boulder.
Okay,
but anyway,
we got to stop picking on Boulder here. But,
no, we don't. No, we don't.
We can go to the. In any case, let's go back to this slide here. It's just kind of a cartoon, but you mentioned radon, Graham, and radon, is probably the substance that most people are going to encounter in their lifetime. And on the scale of society, where we're talking about millions of people, it's the most likely sort of poisonous or toxic thing that people, shouldn't be alarmed about.
They are passively going to be coming in contact with.
But they should be aware of. And in Colorado, it's a big deal. And partly, and that's because we have the Rocky Mountains over here and Pikes Peak and all these granites. And those granites have... So the mineral we just showed you, torbanite, is basically a weathering byproduct of granite. So, and other granitoids, let's say. And so radon, you hear about it as a gas. You're like, well, what does that have to do with granite? Well, it turns out that basically the micas, for the most part, in Pikes Peak and other areas in this vicinity, have a little bit of uranium in them, and there's lots of other minerals that have uranium in, zircon and the like. But that basically, as it decays, pops out as radium, and that then decays and turns into radon. And radon, of course, decays into something else. It can become polonium and other things that are not so good. But the key here isn't that being next to Pike Peak is dangerous, but that it forms a gas which is you're not going to be able to smell or taste or see, and it's generally heavier than most of the air around here. It's going to sit if you have a basement with no ventilation, or you got a mineral cabinet that's like totally closed and super hot, full of super hot minerals like we have over at the USGS over here in the hot room, that's unventilated, I guess is what we're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the solution to these is the classic solution to all pollution. Dilution.
Or you pump it out of your basement. That's why they put in a radon pump in people's basements. It's basically a fan that connects to a kind of a pipe network that's underneath your slab of your house. And it's not a huge costly thing to do, but there are lots of detectors that can detect radon in your home or in your
they sell a little
collections.
kit at Home Depot there. You can buy and you mail it off, and they say you've got so many picocuries a day of whatever. We had to check for it at the mine because we had a mine in granite.
It's standard.
It's standard, and it's at Sweet Home. We were open for 13, 14 years. Drove what do we have? Probably 4,000 feet of tunnel, which is more exposure than most people's basements have. And we didn't have any because we ventilated. I'm sure if you shut the mine and let it set for 2 or 3 years, it would eventually seep in and you'd get some. But ventilation, a couple thousand cubic feet a minute worth of air, solved the problem. But radon is probably the most common mineral that people would passively come into contact with that could do you harm. So how much radon do you get to breathe before you get a tumor on your forehead?
I don't know. And I get this growth right here. I had my dermatologist looking. So one of the other things you probably did, I want to talk a little bit more about radon in all seriousness. But
Are you pushing radon? Do you own stock in radon?
No, I don't.
Okay, just checking.
But
just checking.
No, because there's a couple things.
Full disclosure.
A couple things that you're not going to learn at Home Depot or on Wikipedia about radon that are relevant. So one of the things you probably did in your mind also was, I'm guessing, you kind of applied some dust suppression here and there.
Yeah.
Because the other way that radon is relevant, you did ventilation, but you also didn't have a lot of dust in the mine. And one of the things about radon is that it oftentimes will bond to clay particles or dust that, just like the silica and chrysotile and other things,
provides a method for it to be ingested and stay ingested in your lungs.
And then it sits there in your lungs, in your alveoli, this little particle of dust that itself isn't radioactive but has radon on it, and that then will emit polonium, which is toxic. Think Chernobyl, and you'll get potentially a tumor. Your body will have a defect around there, and over time, thousands of those would give you some risk, just like working in an asbestos mine or a silica mine or something
some
like
other
that.
place. So it's not always evident how things are bad for you, like the quartz.
Exactly. So I'm not saying to panic, but the other thing that that at least in Colorado is relevant is that a lot of our rock formations that underlie the soil of Denver, of the western slope and the like, have big boulders of granite that rolled down the hill 100,000 years ago or 60 million years ago, and they have micas in them that are emitting it. Those rocks have also been broken down and are in the soil or whatever below your house, and so even though you may not have a house on Pikes Peak or whatever the equivalent mountain range is near where we are, kind of testing for that in your basement is a worthwhile thing. And
Says the man who owns stock in the Radon Ventilation Company, Inc.
I have 3 little kids. I have a basement. It cost me $20 to check. It didn't take that much time. But what I did do, which you may think about doing if you have a groundwater below your house, is to put your radon detector there for a year, not for a week or a day. And the reason that's relevant in places like this is that we've got a lot of groundwater below our house, and the unit of rock below us is the Denver Formation, and then there's the Morrison a little bit below those, and those are full of radioactive dinosaur bones and tree trunks and other mineral bits that either have been primarily or secondarily mineralized with uranium. And as the groundwater level changes seasonally, just like the water level in your creek is higher in the spring than it is in the late fall,
these things
it
out.
can push that radon up into your basement, let's say during high groundwater levels or high flow, in a way that it might not if levels were low. And so if you just go do one check for a day, that might not be as sufficient as doing it over the course of a season if you have groundwater pumping in your area. And I live in Denver. I live in the middle of the city, and it's an active process there. And turns out we have very low background levels of radon in our basement, but other people that live 2 miles away might have high levels. So
anyway, get checked early and often.
Yeah. So don't freak out about it, but in the scope of like things in your mineral collection, that's actually probably a bigger risk than any mineral you got sitting in your cabinet.
What else we got on the list? What time are we at? I can't read it. Don't forget your glasses, folks.
Yeah.
We got chrysotile.
This is chrysotile. This is a fun one. There's a picture of Libby, Montana, where they used to mine this to put in
well, actually, Libby, what they did is they had perlite in Libby.
Yeah.
The W.R. Grace Company made perlite, and in the perlite, they actually had there was, what the heck was it, the mineral that was in there? It was actinolite or something was in there, and the actinolite is not the same as this chrysotile, but it's asbestiform mineral, of which there's probably 40 or 50 pretty common ones, and probably several hundred
unpronounceable ones
that are basically these cyclosilicate minerals that are fuzzy.
Yeah.
And even if they don't look fuzzy, under a microscope, they look like little fish barbs. The fibers are broken and they have little barbs, and when you breathe this stuff in, same with the silica, gets in your lungs, aggravates it, and causes a specific kind of cancer that James Sokolov would like you to call him right now and say, I think I was exposed, I'm entitled to millions.
Yeah,
but
it's called mesothelioma, I believe.
Yes, it's
right?
called mesothelioma. It's this very specific cancer that's caused by the aggravation of these fibers in the small parts of your lungs.
So if you've got one, this is a zeolite mineral that can do the same things. But let's go back to the chrysotile. I mean, this is in floor tiles, it's in roofing, it's shingles, it's all around us. And the key there is that you don't need to freak out about it, but don't necessarily powder it up and snort it, right?
And the other thing, folks, that I don't know how much time we have, is there's many kinds of asbestos, and only a few of those kinds have actually been linked to mesothelioma. There's a few very specific ones that cause this, and then there's the other 100 or so kinds. So when people hear asbestos, they're like freaked out.
It's like hearing radiation. Radiation is all around us.
It's everywhere. It's coming from the monitor you're watching now.
The sun is emitting it, but
when we worked out at Benitoite, the asbestos out there was 9,000 feet thick. They drilled it. There was 9,000 feet.
Holy smokes!
In the Diablo range there. They drilled it all over looking for this stuff, and the guys where we had leased the thing was the King City Asbestos Company. And ironically, if you research the asbestos in California, you will find that almost none of the people who worked at those asbestos mines ended up with mesothelioma. They ended up with silicosis and other kinds of lung diseases, but they never ended up specifically with mesothelioma. That asbestos that came from those particular mines didn't cause this. It caused other problems, but it didn't cause this disease. Eventually, they were shut down due to litigation because asbestos was asbestos, and these guys gave up. The last
other ways to use other products or
there's other ways,
materials that are
synthetic
just
materials,
safer and easier.
safer and easier. And what they were doing with their asbestos at the end when they went out of business, they were mixing with paint to make flexible marine paint because the fibers in there were just the right amount of flexible. And so they'd mill this stuff down and they'd ship it off to Japan in 50-pound bags, or it'd be made into paint to be put on boats. You'd never know all the places this stuff was, but the point is, when you hear the word asbestos, get some education. Don't just call James Sokoloff. The guy, they're making billions off of this, and certainly there was a lot of harm caused by Libby, Montana, where they spread this stuff over thousands of square miles, where we had the video there, or the picture of the dust cloud coming from the Grace factory. And clearly, that wasn't so well. There's a high incidence there of mesothelioma because of the actinolite.
Yeah. So I think maybe we should even just wrap up here. I mean, there's lots of minerals, whether they're zeolites or mining, that we've learned a lot about over the years, and when the process of turning them into powders or using them in liquids, like I think about go back a couple hundred years, and were the Romans sitting there with their leaded plates and met someone from China or Mongolia with a cinnabar candy dish with a Japanese emperor who had his stibnite fork. I mean, those are probably not a good combination of things, but we've learned a lot since then. And I mean, unless you're using these on a regular basis or in certain forms, as you said, they are poisonous. Their derivative byproducts can be used for important industrial processes that you got to be cautious around.
For your grill.
Yeah. Don't use Galena seasoning on your grill, but
I like it.
I personally think Galena is beautiful. We get comments all the time in the museum like, "I saw a Galena on display. You better get that off right now. I saw kids in the building." And it's great that you're concerned, because it's being concerned about those things that allows us to go, is that really dangerous or not? And people check this stuff out. So
there you go. Poisonous minerals for 1 hour.
Yeah. All right. We really all have a great day.
51 minutes.
What? 51 minutes?
Just 51 minutes.
Well, we started a little bit late.
No, it's on the timer.
I can't read the timer.
So the most poisonous thing out there probably isn't even a mineral. It's some gas that comes off a mineral that's decomposing. And that, on the scale of things, if you have time, get it checked out.
And if you don't have time, live large.
Get Graham to do it.
Live large. I've never.
There are a lot of places that actually will send you a free radon testing kit, and they'll send it to you because it's part of a research study. And all you have to do is tell them where you're collecting the data and send it back to them. And
there you go. Freebies.
Freebies. Whoa. Our freebies next week on Minerals Live, right?
I don't know. I won't be here. I'll be on my way to Tucson to unpack your minerals.
Steve will be here. There won't be anything free.
Okay, well, stay tuned. Stay tuned for Captain Superlative, and maybe we'll see you in Tucson in a few weeks, folks.
Yep.
We're going to have a display of killer blue minerals down there. Pun intended.
Yep.
Yeah. Pun intended. Killer. There you
Thanks,
go.
Graham.
We'll see you later. Have fun.
Thanks, everybody.
See you in a month.
We'll see you next month. Take care.